I grew up in rural Alabama, about 50 miles from Montgomery, outside of a little place called Troy. But one day in 1955, at the age of 15, I heard about Rosa Parks. I heard about Martin Luther King Jr. I heard Dr. King speaking on an old radio. I saw him on television. The action of Rosa Parks, the leadership, and the words of Dr. King inspired me to find a way to get in the way, to get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble. The first time I got arrested, I felt free. I felt liberated. I felt like I crossed over. In 1963, I was 23 years old. I was elected the national chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, better known as SNCC. My first responsibility was to travel through parts of Arkansas, Alabama, and Georgia, and later to meet in Washington, D.C. in June of 1963 with others of the leadership, with President Kennedy at the White House. And in this meeting with President Kennedy, the Big Six included A. Philip Randolph, who had organized the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. We also had Roy Wilkins of the NAACP, Whitney Young of the National Urban League, James Farmer, who was head of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, young Martin Luther King Jr., who was the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, who had led the Montgomery bus boycott, and then John Lewis. And in that meeting, our leader, our spokesperson, A. Philip Randolph, spoke up. In his baritone voice, he said, "Mr. President, the black masses are restless, and we're going to march on Washington." We hadn't even discussed the idea of a march on Washington. President Kennedy didn't like what he heard. He started moving around in his chair. And he said, "If you bring all these people to Washington, won't there be violence and chaos and disorder? And we will never get a civil rights bill through the Congress." Mr. Randolph responded and said, "Mr. President, this will be an orderly, peaceful, nonviolent protest." We got up early on the morning of August 28th. It was a beautiful day. It was hot. The sun was shining bright. We made it to the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. I looked out and I saw so many people. Some people said it was only 250,000. I think it was one of the great undercounts of all time. I think it was probably of 500,000 people there. It was a sea of humanity, hundreds and thousands of people, black and white, men and women. I spoke number 6. I looked to my left, and I saw hundreds of young people in the trees trying to get a better view of the podium. Then I looked straight ahead again. And I saw all of these young women and young men fighting black with their feet in the water, in the pool, trying to cool off. And I spoke. Several other people spoke, but the most meaningful speech that day, I thought, was a speech by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was the last speaker. On this particular day, he knew he was preaching. He turned the marble steps of the Lincoln Memorial into a modern-day pulpit. And when he said, "I have a dream today," a dream deeply rooted in the American dream, you knew he wanted us to participate in sharing and believing in his dream. And he was saying, in effect, it's not just my dream, it is a dream for America. And when the march was all over, President Kennedy invited us back down to the White House. He stood in the door of the Oval Office, greeting each one of us, shaking our hands. He was like a beaming, proud father. He was so happy that everything had gone so well. And he said over and over again, "You did a good job, you did a good job." And when he got to Dr. King, he said, "And you had a dream." That was my last time seeing President Kennedy. The March on Washington, in my estimation, was one of the finest hours for the Civil Rights Movement. But 18 days after the March on Washington was over, it was a terrible bombing of the church in Birmingham, where 4 little girls were killed on a Sunday morning. That was a sad and dark hour for the movement. It just tore out the essence of your heart. And many of us mourned and cried. I happened to be back in Alabama visiting my mother and father, my sisters and brothers, when we heard about what happened. And I called the office in Atlanta, the office of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and we made a decision that I should go to Birmingham. And I met my friend, Julian Bond, the communication director for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And we got there right about the same time. And we stood across the street from the church. And we remained there for the funeral of the 4 little girls. Dr. King delivered the eulogy of 3 of them. But it made us more determined than ever before to go all out to end segregation and racial discrimination, to get a civil rights bill passed, do whatever it took to get a voting rights bill passed. I saw that and believe that through politics we can bring about change. I was with Robert Kennedy, campaigning with him, when we heard that Dr. King had been assassinated. We were together in Indianapolis, Indiana. And that evening, when I heard that Dr. King had been assassinated, I said to myself, we still have Robert Kennedy. After the funeral was over, I traveled to Los Angeles and teamed up with Cesar Chavez to campaign for Robert Kennedy. And the night of the Los Angeles and California primary, I was in Los Angeles, was in Bobby Kennedy's room. He never came back. He was killed that night. And after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy, I became convinced more than ever before that I had to do something to pick up where they left off. And I again made a decision that I would give everything I had, everything, to do what I could to help make America better and to create a more perfect union.